One does not. Sorry, guys. Hello, hello. Welcome, welcome. Sorry about that. I had a little bit of... this is the first time I've done these premiere streams. I didn't know that I wasn't... it said that I had started streaming, but apparently I wasn't live. Or was I live? I don't know. Can you guys hear me? See me now? Testing, testing, 1, 2, 1, 2. Everybody hear me? Give me a thumbs up. Yeah? Could you not hear me before? There was like 5 minutes. I was talking to myself for a good 5 minutes, boys. So, boys and ladies. No? Okay. All right. Well, that's okay. That's fine. Reading to myself, by myself, all alone. Oh, sorry, guys. It's the first time that I've done one of those premieres, so I am live now. Cool. Okay. Thanks, Classic Muslim. I appreciate that. So yeah, so I had started what I thought was the stream for about 5 minutes, and I didn't know that with the premieres, you have to hit start the stream, and then another button comes up on the prompt and says go live. I didn't know that. So I was like, uh-oh. So I was out here reading this post. I was talking to you guys, and it wasn't live. So that's my fault. I'll know that for next time. Sorry about the late start. 5 minutes only. Like, thank goodness I realized that. I didn't get through the whole stream. You guys be like, what are you? Where are you? So I'm here. I was here on time, but I'm a smooth brain, and so I didn't see that I wasn't live. But so this stream, I figured that we'll think of it as a rehearsal. Thank you. I appreciate that. So this stream, I wanted to go through Hilarion Hagee's reasons for reversion, and I wanted to go mainly through his blog because I wanted to do primary sources. I didn't want it to be some secondary news clipping or some secondary article written by another source. I wanted to kind of go through it through his own eyes and see and read through at least a few of his posts on his blog. And he was posting them under this pseudonym before anybody knew that he had that he was even really entertaining this idea. So his posts go back not that far on this blog, at least, but they're all fairly short, 6 minute, 3 minutes. So I figured we'd go through at least the Muslim Priest series, and then he has one that's got some resources along the way, which are some books. He mentioned blog and theology in one of his posts. Yeah, we'll see. He does in the resources along the way. I read through most of this already, so I'm familiar with it. And so yeah, I figured we'll start with the Muslim Priest introduction. Wall Williams. So to start, he opens with the prayer, which you guys can correct me if I'm wrong. I believe, what does that prayer say in Arabic? Yeah, I think it's that you take refuge from Satan. Is that what you take refuge from the evil one or something like that? I don't want to butcher it with my poor pronunciation. I'm going to have to practice that. The wolf is howling, I see. That's right. In the name of the God most merciful. Okay. I hear it said every time a prayer opens. Islam is the serenity, the one Almighty preserved till the end times. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. He starts with quoting the Divine Comedy. So in the middle of the journey of our life, I came to myself within a dark wood where the straight way was lost. Just kind of gives you chills right off the bat. Dante, if those who don't know the Divine Comedy by Dante, it's a very revered work within European Christendom. And it's weird because I've noticed that a lot of reverts that are Western utilize the Divine Comedy as kind of a middle ground between Christendom and Islamic civilization. They utilize it a lot, and they praise it quite frequently. So it's interesting because I've always thought of it more of a Christian text, but they seem to think that it's kind of like a gateway into Islam because of some of its themes, interestingly enough. So we'll go on and let's go and let's read through this. All of life is a pilgrimage. All of life is a seeking of that primordial oneness of God, a yearning towards the one who is our beginning, our end, our all, and everything. And as Blessed Augustine has said in his Confessions, our hearts are restless until they rest in thee, O Lord. So for those who don't know, Blessed Augustine, he's saying Blessed Augustine probably because maybe he's leaving the church, but it would be Saint Augustine. He might be saying Blessed Augustine because of his Orthodox priors, because he's a saint in Orthodoxy, a saint in Catholicism, but he's a little bit more scrutinized on the Orthodox framework. It's one of the first forms of Italian, as we all know, not Latin. Yeah, as we know it now, not Latin. Dante. Yeah. So he quotes Augustine, and probably in his Confessions, which is his like magnum opus. It's a fantastic read. I'd recommend it to anybody, Muslim or Christian alike, because it's fantastic. It was instrumental in my conversion to Christianity from agnosticism back when I was in college. Oh wow, okay. Read Dante's Inferno influencing Mutanabbi. Okay, has Berber origins. Yeah, that's what they've talked about. Yeah, exactly. So that's pretty cool. So who am I? I am currently a priest in the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. That would be what we would regard as. Some of the Orthodox would say that's them. Catholics would say the same. I regard them as both basically the same church, just with some minor differences that they've separated mainly on jurisdictional lines. A traditional priest, or perhaps you can say traditionalist, quote unquote. Yet that term has come with some unwelcome connotations and baggage. At the moment, I am on a sort of semi-private leave while the practical arrangements of my move to Islam are made final. Okay, so he had already obviously started to remove himself from the church. And for those who don't remember, this guy was a monk. He was also a priest. So a lot of Orthodox would call him a hieromonk, which means that you have the dual role of a monk and a priest, which is a very prestigious position in both the Catholic and the Orthodox world. And so he quotes the traditionalist with a capital T, and so Nassif will be aware of that term because that kind of lumps him in with the understandings of Genon and of Evola and of that perennialist, quote-unquote, school. This is always when you see that capital T traditionalist, Hossein Nasr, and those guys, he's linking himself to that primordial tradition. That's what that's why he says the primordial oneness of God. He's utilizing that traditional language. You can already see that that's where his mindset is at. I'm also in the middle journey of my life, having reached middle age. Though at one time I would have felt, as Dante did, reaching the mid part of my life and finding myself lost in the dark woods, I wouldn't say this now, as I have found the straight way. There was no midlife crisis involved. It is simply that we all see things differently at different points in our lives, with different eyes, looking back, as it were, hopefully growing in wisdom, inshallah. My whole life has been one of intense spiritual searching. I can completely empathize with that, of yearning, of devotion, reading the Gospels and Holy Scripture alone in my room hour after hour as a young boy. I took seriously the call of Jesus Christ. If you would be perfect, go, sell what you possess and give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven, and come and follow me. Matthew 19:21. Obviously, that's from the New Testament. It was a radical pursuit of truth and of God. To find the truth, and then to live for it, with all one's heart, with all one's mind, and with all one's soul. Come what may, and cost what it will. So, this is just, I sympathize and empathize with all of this. It resonates with me very deeply. Who was this God whom we seek? How do we find the unseen? How do we know the unknowable? How do we define the uncircumscribable? The nominal American Protestant of my youth didn't really seem to have any deep answers. That's absolutely accurate. One of the great quotes is to remain a Protestant is to remain ignorant of history. That's one of the quotes that a lot of Catholic and Orthodox pull out. And so I went on a search as a young man. What is truth? I sought to find it myself. My agnostic search began in my teenage years and extended through college and into my 20s. The Calvinist God, wow, he was a Calvinist too. I forgot about that part. The Calvinist God that I knew as a child seemed distant, unloving, and uncaring. The theology seemed bookish and dry. Christ, however, was a different matter. Where did he fit in all of this? The Calvinist God of whom I was instructed did not seem to match the Christ I knew in the Gospels. The parable of the prodigal son seemed nothing like the doctrine of the double predestination taught to us in Sunday school. Double predestination meaning that you're predestined to heaven, you're predestined to hell. That there are some who are vessels they'll quote scripture. The Calvinists will quote scripture saying that there are some that are made in vessels of mercy, and there are some that are made in vessels of wrath. So that means that, like, from the very womb, from your very conception, you are predestined by God to either heaven or to hell. That is what the Calvinist doctrine of tulip, total depravity, all of those things. That's what it teaches. Yeah, it can be seen as unfair. Definitely, it can be categorized as that. There's a beautiful side of it, I will admit, but if you're one of the vessels of wrath, it's horrible, right? Can we, by our own will, repent and turn back to God, or has our fate already been decided by a totally sovereign Lord? I found that the latter concept totally monstrous over time. In like Ivan Karamazov, that's a book by Fyodor Dostoevsky, I think. The brothers Karamazov, I returned my ticket and rejected such a cosmically cruel God, whether or not he truly existed. Even if it should mean that I be damned to hell, I would go out of protest of such a cosmic injustice. Through all my searching, I may have been many things, but I was never an atheist. I knew there was a God or an ultimate truth, perhaps a force, but it or he was there, waiting to be discovered. The Tao, or the Tao, perhaps, was as close as I could understand it. The Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. I carried a small copy of the Tao Te Ching with me in my pocket for years, starting at the age of 15. Man, he's been at this. He was at this since he was very young, asking these kinds of questions. It's amazing. Some people are just called, in a really special way. I was never satisfied, however. There was always something missing. I studied Buddhism. I sat in Zazen meditation, waiting. Waiting for what? I wasn't sure. Enlightenment? The dissolution of my ego? Mindfulness? Much of Buddhism in America didn't seem terribly serious. That's no joke. Something like Zen Buddhism is intimately and deeply tied to the Japanese psyche and culture. It's funny that he says that. There's a lot of Westerners who adopt Buddhism and they end up leaving after practicing for a very long time. And they talk about how there's a deep question that a lot of Westerners have posited, and it was that, can Western people actually meditate? Is it just like a biological mechanism within specific groups of people that they can do it, whereas Westerners can't? There was a guy who wrote, his actually name is Paul Williams. He's not blogging theology, but he's another Paul Williams who converted to Catholicism after deeply practicing Buddhism for 30 years. He's the professor emeritus of Eastern religious, particularly studying Buddhism. And he left after 30 years. And that was one of the things that he talked about, was meditation just never worked for him. He never was able to reach any stages of enlightenment or anything like that. It's very, very interesting. That's a very common remanifesting truth that I keep seeing a lot. So although alluring initially, it kind of just doesn't really work. So it doesn't seem like a tradition which could simply be lifted up wholesale and set right down in the middle of 21st century America without doing some damage to its integrity, and boy has it. In the Zazen meditation hall, there were no Japanese, just angry ex-Baptists in Japanese robes, sipping green tea, chanting phonetically ancient Buddhist chants, and then complaining about George Bush and Fox News. I don't doubt that they were sincere, but it simply did not seem to quote-unquote work. Yeah, there's a lot of Americans, a lot of Westerners who kind of adopt another religious tradition simply because they have dissatisfaction with American Protestantism, which is the most common faith that people practice. And because of its shallowness, they call it the revolving door, the Protestant revolving door. And that's why you have these big mega churches and all the dancing and the singing and stuff like that, because they have such difficulty keeping people there, because it offers really nothing deep, I would say. Some people it may, but for most it doesn't. It was one day in the summer of 2003 that I chanced upon an American Buddhist magazine in a Barnes & Noble in which there was an article complaining about the eclectic inauthenticity of American Buddhism. Well, that's confusing. Many American Buddhists are really into reading Rumi, for example, the article lamented. Rumi? I had never heard of Rumi. So naturally, I immediately abandoned the magazine and bought a book of Rumi's poetry. It was the popular Coleman Barks translation. And amazingly, this was a major milestone in my life. Here, in the poetry of Rumi, did I find a new way to connect to God, to know him, God was no longer the stern, distant judge, nor the arbitrary Calvinist monster, nor the abstract ultimate reality. Here was my beloved, capital B, face to face with me. He was a God whom I loved and who loved me. I felt absorbed in the ocean, into the ocean that was the love of God. I have never felt or experienced anything like it. There is a candle in your heart ready to be kindled. There is a void in your soul ready to be filled. You feel it, don't you? Asked Rumi. And yes, I did feel it. I learned for this new love. Watered down Allah removed Rumi. What is that a quote from something? And this is another quote. Rumi is poet. Yeah. Liberal Rumi? Yeah, this is the thing, and I think he goes into this later, and he talks about how this translation actually didn't really do it justice. Sometimes it does, of the like, he's the voice of the poor, he's also liberation theology of South America, and that's also neglected as a mere footnote in history. Yeah. Yeah. Dr. MLK Jr. was actually kind of, had some very weird theological positions. Yeah, he wasn't exactly the exemplary figure that a lot of people just take him to be. He was also like an adulterer and some other terrible things, but we won't get into that. Inside this new love, die. Your way begins on the other side. Become the sky. Take an axe to the prison wall. Escape. Walk out like someone suddenly born into color. Do it now. You are covered with thick cloud. Slide out the side. Die and be quiet. Quietness is the surest sign that you have died. Your old life was a frantic running from silence. The speechless full moon comes out now. Maybe that's another quote from Rumi. This was my discovery of the deep ocean of Sufism. Sufism, not simply the mystical side of Islam as it is often described, but this depth of spiritual tradition, which is truly central to Islam in its totality. This is a reoccurring theme with these people, these traditionalists or these perennial teachers. It's this Sufic thing that happens within Islam, and that's what they're really drawn to, it seems. This truth I would only discover much later. Oh, yeah. My discovery of Sufism was not my first encounter with Islam, however. Aside from the reading about the central tenets and pillars of Islam as a teen, 9/11 was my first real encounter, as it was for many Americans and American converts to Islam. After the terror attacks in October of 2001, the local Islamic center held an open house which I attended. I ate with the Muslim men there. I prayed with them, listened to them, attended lectures and speeches about what it is to be Muslim. My interest piqued. I signed up for courses on Islam in college. In a course on Islamic civilization, I listened to the Quran beautifully recited for the very first time. I was deeply moved. I was inexplicably drawn to it, but my interest then was still mostly political and academic in a post-9/11 America. Rumi, however, was the gateway. He provided the missing key. By 2003, I yearned to become Muslim. I saw the beauty of it, the depth, the truth of it. I spoke with the imam about conversion. I hung out at the local Islamic center. I made Muslim friends. It was a beautiful and joyful moment. But I didn't convert. At the time, I was too fearful of such a conversion. But how would I be perceived if I rejected Christ? As I saw such a conversion entailing, how could I do such a thing? My parents and family would disown me. Society would see me as a terrorist. I backed away at that point, I'm ashamed to say, and for reasons which, looking back, were really mostly cultural. I chose to seek out such depth in theology and mysticism as I saw in Sufism and in Islam within a Christian context. Not far from me was an Antiochian Orthodox church. The divine liturgy was sung in Arabic at times, and it was not the Quran in all its unparalleled and divine beauty, but it would suffice. In my study of the depth of the Christian tradition, the Orthodox East was the only place where there was something comparable to the beauty and depth in which I saw in Islam. Not simply the beauty and the depth, but the firmness in upholding tradition, morality, family, and society. Which sometimes becomes negative. You can, no doubt. That's where the whole Sharia comes in, right? Like you have to maintain, and a lot of Sufis have talked about that, I feel like. I've seen a lot of them comment on it, that like without adherence to the law, the divine law, Sufism just spirals off into the rails. They have to be, co-equals. You have to hold them both in high regard. The exoteric and the esoteric, hybridize into one. You can't have one without the other. They both, the pure legalism dies and becomes too rigid and just, it doesn't fill the soul. Whereas, you have to have the inner spiritual side of things. I've just heard them comment on it. All of my speculation is only as an outsider, of course. Orthodoxy was my compromise. Yet orthodoxy was a complete system, a whole civilization, a depth in theology, a world of monasticism, a thing of transcendent beauty. It was something in which one could immerse oneself and throw oneself in completely, which is what I did. It's exactly what it was for me when I first converted. It was like I had found something really special. I remember, because I'd never heard of orthodoxy before, and I remember looking into both Catholicism and Protestantism really deeply. And then when I discovered orthodoxy, my first encounter with it was on a website called Coming Home. And it was all about this deep mystical experience that everybody had had, looking for something that they couldn't find, and they just couldn't put their finger on what it was. And they'd searched in all these churches, and they had been New Agers, or they had been anything just to fill the spiritual void that the West leaves in so many people. And I remember when I found that, and I looked up my local Orthodox churches, and the first time I set foot in a Greek Orthodox church, I was brought to tears. Because it was just so wholly different from what I had experienced. Even the Catholic churches around me currently are very modernized. There are no traditional Gothic cathedrals, anything like that. Fahad, what's up, man? Hey, Rafat, how you guys doing? So yeah, no, I totally understand that. And then we have a local monastery here for the Orthodox Church in my area, and it's fantastic. It's a sisterhood. There's such a deep, beautiful spirituality up there. It's up in the mountains. It's, they tend the land all on their own. They built most of the monastery themselves. It's really, really fantastic. So it was kind of just this eye-opening experience for a lot of us. Islam was something that I still respected. Yet, if I was to take on the Orthodox faith, I would do so totally and unreservedly. So different was this ancient and apostolic beauty from the dry and fractured Protestantism of my youth. I sought God with my whole heart and my whole mind and with my whole soul. And if Islam was not a path open to me at the time, then I could find him certainly in Orthodoxy. Perhaps in Orthodoxy, I could find the oneness and wholeness of God in which I sought. So, and then he's got a picture of an Orthodox cathedral, not like with the circular domes and everything and all the icons everywhere. Yeah, exactly. Away from the temptations of urban life. Yeah, it really is a profound experience to go and be there and to look at them. I remember one of my first experiences when I was there was I had never seen any nuns, any deeply spiritual people who had joined a holy order or anything like that. And I remember my first steps on the grounds, I had heard a bunch of power tools working. I was like, oh boy, I was here hoping that I could get away from all this hustle and bustle. Did I start the stream just now? Yeah, just a little bit ago, about 20 minutes ago. And I remember walking onto the grounds and hearing all the power tools. I was like, oh boy, we're going to see a bunch of sweaty construction workers and this whole beautiful experience that I had planned, like I had felt deep within me, like it was going to really move me. I was like, this is going to be ruined by this. And then come to find out, all the power tools were being worked by all of the sisters, all of the nuns. Like they were on full garb. Of course, all you could see is their face. The traditional Orthodox garb for those who haven't seen. Yeah. Let's see if I can find a picture, something like this, but all in black. So, like this. This is what they were all wearing, but it was more of a worker uniform, more of like a work uniform than that. That's more of like a religious ceremonial uniform. And so I walked in, they were all wearing that. Essentially, so niqab, yeah, right. So, and they're all just like working these handsaw, like these power tools, driving a backhoe, like a huge powered like forklift like thing. Oh, there's my daughter. But yeah, it was wild. It's like it was more like this, but it was tightly woven around their heads so that it wouldn't fall off or anything. But very, very beautiful. But it was the coolest thing ever, seeing all these sisters wearing this garb and working all the power tools. It was really, really something. Big boo. So, all right, let's go on to part 3, part 2. In my first installment of this brief spiritual autobiography, I explored my early... Okay, let's streamline my personal history. Okay. As a convert to Orthodox Christianity in my early 20s, I poured my whole self into the faith and the church. I see your kind of attraction to Sufism. If I'm not wrong, I just want to highlight that they're a bit of exaggerated in the direction of the spirituality of that some practices are considered against Islam. Yes, I'm aware that there are some that are iffy, some practices that are iffy within the Sufi tradition, and those should be rejected as innovation for sure. I wouldn't wish to do anything that is against that isn't in accords with traditional stuff. That's outside of the tradition. That would be blasphemy in my same thing in Orthodoxy. We have the same problem that sometimes certain monasteries kind of there's one practice called hesychasm, which is like this very profound meditative state, and it can flirt with the lines of almost like Eastern Hindu or Buddhist meditations, and so that's to be rejected. So, but Sufis or Sufi-inspired Muslims are the majority of the Ummah. That's what I've been aware of as well. Yes, yeah, there you go. True Islam is between Sufism and Salafism, for sure. And it seems that bears out. Most people seem to fall in that middle ground. As a convert to Orthodox Christianity in my 20s, I poured my whole self into the faith and the church. The church and the Orthodox faith were by far the central and most defining reality of my life, forming my day-to-day activities, all of my relations and my social life, as well as my academic studies. My sincerity and zeal were quickly noted by my priests and others in the church, and in short order, after some academic and pastoral information, I was raised to the rank of priesthood. This period in my life marks one of great personal growth and activity. Though I am generally shy and withdrawn by nature, I quickly grew into the outward focus of priestly ministry and working intimately with people from day to day. It was a work that I particularly loved and which became a real part of me, though I found it often draining at times. Similarly, I loved the prayerful and very choreographical liturgical services of the Orthodox Church. I felt most at home standing at the altar, surrounded with the rising incense and angelic choirs singing the praises of Almighty God. That's true Islam is following the Quran and Sunnah. Abdal Hakim Murad's version of Sufism as well. Like, I agree. I think Hakim Murad is a wonderful man, for sure. I watch a lot of his information, or a lot of his videos and things like that. In short, it seemed that I found my niche. During this period, my thoughts on Islam were complicated. The period of 2010 to 2018, roughly what I call my love-hate relationship period with Islam. During this time, the war in Iraq and Afghanistan was winding down, yet Islamic attacks in Europe and ISIS seemed to be on the rise. I still felt respect for Islam, if anything, as a force to be reckoned with. Yet my thoughts on Islam, hey baby, hey Kiki. Yet my thoughts on Islam during this period ran the full gambit of intense hatred and admiration towards an underlying draw towards conversion. It was a period of trying to make sense of the phenomenon that was Islam from my perspective as an Orthodox priest. Hold on, sweetheart. Let me see if I can take care of her, guys. Probably hungry. Here. Want food? Let me see if I can take care of her so she doesn't come in here and disrupt us. 1 second. What's this? Here, let me go get you some toys, huh? Let's get you some toys outside. I'll be real quick, guys. I love how his daughter always finds her way onto his stream. She does. Sorry, I hope nobody's like perturbed by that. She's just a curious little one. Europe is filled with the theological struggles of radical kinds, especially when it comes to the struggles of poverty, class, same today. Anglo-Saxon history from the 11th century has had examples of that. It's just that Americans are not so well versed in European history. No, that's no doubt. They're like estranged children, orphans, as it were. estranged from their own traditions and their own history. It's very sad. Sorry about that. Yeah, like normally she'll be able to play and stuff, but sometimes she'll come in and I just want to make sure that I can get through this. Not like it's a bother, but... So, aside from the steady diet of anti-Islamic media and news, my opinion during this time was formed mostly from reading books full of anti-Muslim polemics and rhetoric. Can empathize with that. I don't know how to say that person's name. The Sword of the Prophet was one of the first books that I read. This was followed by titles such as Understanding Islam by Guillaume Fahey, The Legacy of Jihad by Andrew Boston, The Decline of Eastern Christianity Under Islam, From Jihad to Dimitude by Bat Yaor, Islamic Imperialism by Ephraim Karsh, The Truth About Muhammad by Robert Spencer. That's a name I'm very familiar with. Robert Spencer. He works very closely with a lot of Zionist organizations. He's kind of a perv and a creep. Don't like that guy at all. Seeking Allah, Finding Jesus by Nabil Qureshi. I'm sure that all of you are familiar with Nabil Qureshi. And so on. I read as well Submission by Michael Houellebecq during this period. While this novel can be considered as being anti-Islam, it would play a more complex role later in my thinking, which I'll revisit in a later installment. In this time, I would periodically take part in anti-Islamic polemics online. I bought a copy of Reliance of the Traveler, a classical manual of Islamic sacred law, in order to pull gotcha lines straight from Islamic jurisprudence and use it in online debates and in writings. Oh, Islam is a religion of peace? What about X, Y, and Z ruling, which seems to suggest otherwise? I appreciate that. Watching all the way from Ghana. Wow. Thank you. Well, welcome. Yeah, I like that quote. The Quranic quote. Whatever the messenger gives you, take it. Yeah. And yet, there was always and yet, alongside this steady diet of anti-Islamic rhetoric, there was still a reverence that I felt for Islam. I totally agree with that. A deep respect. That's how I felt. And an envy in a lot of ways. And an envy that was always there. It seemed that Islam shared many of the core values and concerns that traditionalist Catholics and Orthodox shared. Exactly. And I saw them as somewhat of an ally in the face of all-pervasive and ever-expanding and the culture-crushing Western secularism and liberalism. That's exactly the conclusion that I came to. You know, I saw so many polemicists and stuff trying to be anti-Islam when it was very clear that secular liberalism was by far the greater enemy. And that was the same hand that was crushing the Islamicate areas in the Middle East and elsewhere. And to see them as an enemy when they were part of the same destruction that we were experiencing in the West was just bizarre. And so then it showed its face that a lot of people who had these anti-Islamic polemics were basically just like Rand Corporation funded anti-Islamic polemics. Like they were funded counter opposition, basically. Watching from Africa as well, Sudan. Wow, fantastic. Any idea of becoming Muslim? I mean, that's kind of what this is all about. I appreciate the question, though. I witnessed the phenomenon of Western converts to Islam who, after seeing a loss of prayer, a loss of reverence, and a loss of true religious conviction in their Catholic and Christian peers, turned to Islam as a sure faith, a solid bedrock, and a countercultural force directed towards God. One particular article struck me about an American Catholic college girl who embraced Islam by simply observing Muslims that she knew. They saw how they saw how they dressed, how they treated each other, how they ate, how they prayed 5 times a day, often in public. What she saw wasn't honorable, admirable, and pious in her Muslim friends. She could not identify, at least outwardly, in her Catholic peers. How many Christians make it an effort to pray 5 times a day, even in public among ridicule? How many Christians regularly fast? And in what practical way does faith shape our day-to-day life of the average Christian? This student convert found a true faith, a true piety, as well as a true spiritual home in Islam and in the Ummah, the global Muslim community. Testimonies like this impressed me deeply. It's the same for me. A lot of these really intelligent men. It's so funny because there's this constantly repeated trope that I hear so often from Christians online who like to make it out to seem like, and I don't mean this in any disrespectful way, but they like to make it seem like Islam is just this dumb faith. like it is this faith of fools. And if they really looked at the sources and if they really read the material, well, then they would know. They would be enlightened by intelligence, and their rationality would lead them elsewhere. But yet, I know of all of these really brilliant Westerners who were profoundly religious men, very deeply spiritual and intellectual men who had converted to Islam. And so it's always like this double talk, out of both sides of their mouth. And I don't even know honestly, I don't even know if they know of those people. It's kind of weird. I should make a list in another video of all of the people who converted to Islam and their reasons for doing it. There was one guy that I was just reading about that he did it specifically because he thought that Islam had the tools to combat liberalism better than Christianity did. Thought it had the tools. So, yeah, Daniel said exactly this. Wolf is international. And watching how they conduct themselves, yeah. Yeah. My solution, as I saw it then, was to try to form my Christian prayer around Islamic practices. Yes, Orthodox and Catholics have the daily services of the church, matins, vespers, compline, and various small hours. Yet it was not something that a Christian could readily pray wherever they might find themselves without a library of liturgical books on hand. That's true. You have to have... I should show you guys, my liturgical book for my Eastern services is like this big. It's massive. And there's so many variances on the days and what you're to pray on this day and on this hour. And there's been so many revisions based on certain churches, like the Antiochians don't pray like the Russians, and the Russians don't pray like the Greeks. So it was very, very complex. It was one of the reasons why I left Orthodoxy for Catholicism, because at least Catholicism was consolidated. You can go to a Catholic church on one Sunday, and they will read the certain gospel readings, whatever time of year it is with Lent or whatever. I could go to one here in California, and then I could go to Japan and it would be the following Sunday, and it would be a direct continuation of all of the teachings that had just been done. And I could do that. I could do it again. I could fly to Malaysia. I could go to wherever, I'm just picking off random places. So, yeah. And even if Christians were able to do so, such piety and regular prayer would not be prescribed. It would be a personal choice and a decision to do so. There would be no real shared experience of prayer as the body of Christ. It's true. That's true. That's, and that was one of the things that drew me more to Catholicism, because of the unity. Even with its problems, there was at least more unity. In this tug of war between hatred and intrigued admiration of Islam, I once again contacted the Imam at my old Islamic center. I craved a sort of dialogue. I wanted to discuss these matters, to flesh them out, and not with the books or blogs or YouTube videos, but with a real human being. I was saddened to learn, however, that my old Imam friend was no longer there, and the human connection, at least at this juncture, was missed. I did the same thing. I went to the local masjid here and tried to talk to the Imam, but there was, of course, a pretty vast language barrier. It was very hard for me to talk to him, which it wasn't his fault, and it's not my fault. It was just, the facts of the case. So he did give me a Quran, though, which I still have. So things continued this way for a while. This is a few years ago, 4 or 5 years ago. Things continued this way for a while without any resolution. Then in 2018, something very intriguing happened. A friend of mine and an Orthodox blogger, a blogger who was, in the past, very fiery in his pro-Orthodox rhetoric, announced his conversion to Islam, seemingly out of the blue. This is Ryan Hunter. And I know this guy, not super personally, but I've met him in person, and I've had correspondence with him in messages. I remember being at work, and I was actually messaging him about Islam when he converted. So, reverted, whatever. Not whatever, but I just mean to make sure that I make that distinction. Things continued this way for a while without any resolution. Then in 2018, something very intriguing happened. A friend of... Oh, yeah, sorry, I just read that. My first reaction was disbelief. How could this be? This reaction was closely followed by a sort of visceral disgust. It was a primordial class of civilizations response. How could this man give up the beauty of our Orthodox tradition for this barbaric religion? There was an underlying Islamophobic knee-jerk response in my reaction in my response, to be sure. I could respect Islam from afar, but to actually and concretely convert to it, I still had a hard time wrapping my head around it, even with my own draw to Islam always simmering in the background. And yet, to my own surprise, my response to this conversion was not lament over a lost soul nor an apostate. Perhaps I may have felt this in my gut, but my heart and my head felt otherwise. I was curious more than anything. What led to such a conversion? What is this thought process? What is this emotional process? What is the emotional process? I simply wanted to know. I wanted to know more. In quick order, I reached out to my friend, and this connection led to the third and final act of my own conversion to Islam, which I will explain in part 3. I have Ryan Hunter on this same website. I have his blog here. Who is this Hunter guy? Yeah, he was a former Orthodox guy, and the Orthodox world in America is really small. So like I said, I was very aware of him. So this is part 3. This is the last part. I'm sure he'll add on to this more, but when I last left off, it was 2019. My good Russian Orthodox friend and influential blogger had just announced his conversion to Islam. And by the way, the Russian Orthodox Church is the most traditional of the Orthodox churches. So a lot of people seek refuge in the Russian Orthodox Church. And Genon, in an article that I posted, The Clause of the Sphinx, that talks about, it's a Catholic talking about Genon's position. And that was one of the things that they have mentioned, those traditionalists, is they said that a lot of Christians who have the Catholic Church and the Protestant Church have let them down so badly, they will seek refuge in Orthodoxy. And then they will quickly find that the majority of Orthodoxy is in the same position that Catholicism is in. And the Russian Church is the only one that still has like a primordial truth, and it still has a perennial tradition, and it still has what they call the Sophia Perennis, which is like the primordial wisdom. It still has that spiritual truth built into it, and some people will seek solitude there and all of its rigor and things like that. Is Greek Orthodox different than Russian? They're part of the same Orthodox Church, but they're in schism right now because of the issues in Ukraine. The ecumenical patriarch who sits in, he's the Bishop of Constantinople. He's the proto-pope of the Orthodox. He's what the Orthodox normally would concede as their kind of pope, but they don't regard him in the same way. Him and the Russian patriarch Kirill excommunicated each other, essentially. So you can't take communion in the Greek Orthodox Church or the Russian Orthodox Church if you're from either of those jurisdictions. They're not cross-compatible anymore. So there's a deep rifted schism. So they're the same church. They're supposed to be, and they were in communion with each other, but there are vast differences in their practices. Like, for instance, you'll find a lot of pews, which is like the seats that are in Catholic and Protestant churches. That's a Western thing. There will be a lot of pews in Greek churches. Russians will not allow pews in their churches. What is perennial? It's like the overarching tradition between numerous spiritual faiths. The truth that kind of unites them all. That's what they would say. Okay. For me, 2019 was a pivotal year, perhaps 2020 to be more exact. And maybe that is true for most everyone, given the events of that year. It was in 2019, however, that I entered into a Master's of Theology program at a well-known Catholic university. All of a sudden, I found myself outside of a monastic environment in the heart of a busy Midwestern city. Because, yeah, let us not forget, he was a monk. He was an Orthodox monk before his kind of really serious intellectual ascent. Yeah, I can send you, BH, I can send you some info on like what the perennialists, what the capital T traditionalists or capital P perennialists, what they kind of teach and think. I'll make some posts about it. Any chance for a link to the StreamYard? I don't have a StreamYard set up yet. Yeah, I don't know how, this is my first time kind of doing it. I'm not sure. I don't have one yet. I don't really know how to set it up. I can, though. I'll maybe on a separate stream after this or something. I'll just tune it. Okay, cool. Sorry about that. Yeah, I can do it later for sure, though. I'm sorry. I'm a small boy. I'm still a learning man, as far as that's concerned. 2 important things happened during this period. I had access to a massive university library of well-stocked books in about Islam and Sufism, and 2, the lockdown. In a monastic setting, my access to anything about Islam was limited to what I was able to find online mostly. Much of the time, the quality of this information was hit or miss. Furthermore, much of the books and resources that I had access to were of very biased nature. In a sense, they were very anti-Islamic. Not only did I have a massive library of Islamic material at my disposal, but I also had access to real-life Muslims with whom I could discuss matters of faith and theology. It was a widening of my world beyond the spiritual confines of the monocultural monastery. Excuse me, it's kind of hard to say. Oh no, I appreciate that. Yeah, I appreciate that. That's it's Maurice, right? I believe I recognize your title there on the stream or on the chat. Okay, cool. Thanks for joining, brother. I appreciate it. The spiritual consequences of the lockdown of 2020 cannot be downplayed either. It was the cocoon of my apartment in 2020 in my I don't know if that's French, ascensions, like solitude, that my draw towards Islam deepened. I watched as the entire church shut down completely during the COVID crisis. All sacraments cut off, funerals denied, anointing of the sick was done away with. When the faithful most needed the church was not there. The doors were locked. Only a few brave and faithful priests broke this cruel and unjust prohibition and actually took care of their flock. Yeah, that was a huge problem. It was a huge problem for the sacramental churches, because Protestants and stuff don't really care about those kinds of things. They don't care about the sacraments. They don't see that the true presence of Christ is present in the Eucharist and in the anointing of the sick. They don't believe in sacraments like that. And so for the Catholic and the Orthodox, those are very, very, very spiritually important aspects of the faith. And if you are denied those things, you are cut off spiritually from the flowing graces of God if you cannot participate in those things in the church. And so I remember specifically in the same way, we had very restricted services because I was Orthodox. I hadn't become Catholic at the time, but the Orthodox Church was having very serious issues ministering to people. And my priest, both of them, there were two priests who actually, one of them is actually my godfather, were desperately trying to work around, especially here in California. The lockdowns were very, very, very intense. And they were trying to work around them as best they could. And they lamented it so badly. They're like, I remember like my godfather, who's now a priest, saying, like, our flock, what are we to do? Like, how are we supposed to minister them, especially the elderly and the sick? Because, you would give the sacraments, the way that the Orthodox give sacraments is it's from a chalice. It's from a singular chalice, and they give a spoon and they feed you the sacraments, which is the bread and the wine. Yeah, interesting. It found Islam in lockdown. That's crazy. Just wanted to say you're such a nice guy, very likable. I appreciate that, man. Thank you. And so that just even that sacrament itself is very antithetical to what COVID taught us to reverted during lockdown. Yeah. Very antithetical to the cleanliness and the hygiene that was that was forced down all of our throats by those kinds of things, which is it's very interesting. So trying to work the sacraments and stuff in a hygienic and in a clean manner that was compliant with the lockdowns was a very difficult thing. My current priest, my Catholic priest, yeah, he would drive to people's, they had like a van and they would drive to people's houses. And even though he couldn't be near them and he couldn't administer the sacraments to them, he would simply hold out the Eucharist, which is like, we have this thing called Eucharistic adoration, where it'll have the host, which is the body of Christ, within like a sacramental obelisk, and he would just literally hold it in front of their house. He would drive by and he would stand in the rain and he would hold the host in front of them, and people would weep and kneel in front of it, and he would apologize and lament that he couldn't administer the sacraments to them. It's really, really, really powerful. It showed which priests cared, because a lot of priests literally just locked the doors of the church and they wouldn't even show up for services. It's horrible. It was very spiritually testing for a lot of people. So he went through this, I went through this, we all Christians did, all traditional Christians who actually care about those real sacramental practices that were practiced all the way back to the early church fathers and stuff like that believed in the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist and things like that. We were cut off from those things in a very poorly, it's not entirely the church's fault, but they didn't know how to grapple with it. Mosques have been shut down the same effect, and it was Ramadan. That's crazy. I'm doing okay. Having a fun time here. Not a fun time, I'd say, but a very profound time, a very immense spiritual moment. As for myself, as a priest, I could hold divine liturgy on my own in private, and I did. I could pray on my own and did, inviting refugees in for sacraments in what seemed to like an emergency situation where were we to possibly die without the sacraments, because that's part of it. If you're on your deathbed, that's one of the things that the priests will do, both in the Catholic and Orthodox churches. They will minister the sacraments to you on your deathbed. And it's very important. The sacrament of the dying is, I mean, they will think that they're damned to hell if they can't confess their sins, and if they can't participate in the sacraments on their deathbed. So it's a very, very important part of the Christian faith. I don't mean to understate it for you guys, and I know a lot of Muslims may not understand that, but for sincere believing Christians, it is of paramount importance for the pious Christians to participate in those sacraments. You know, you can call that ridiculous or whatever, and I'm not saying that you will, but I'm saying that it is of profound importance. And so, like I said, I saw priests cry because they were unable to do that for people. So, yeah, crazy. It wasn't simply that I had more time during this period to read about my hidden love for Islam. Even more than this, I began to envy a spiritual life like Islam, which was not so tied to a priestly class and a corrupt hierarchy. He actually, in one of his posts, talked about that Michael Lofton made a video about this, that he was actually having very big issues with the hierarchy of the church, and I'm assuming it's probably because of the lockdowns. The lockdowns were probably enforced rigidly by the hierarchy, and he tried to rebel against them, and the hierarchy bit him badly, and they tried to clip his wings. They probably threatened him with defrocking him as a priest, which is an utter humiliation. And so he probably dealt with that, and it probably destroyed him in a lot of ways, as one who's just trying to be faithful to the work of Christ. So, a corrupt hierarchy. Here was born in the desert a nomadic faith, bare forehead and face, touching the ground before a magnificent monotheistic God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And then he quotes the Shahada. I think that is right there. I believe that's what that is. Hey, buddy. I respect it, and I appreciate that, guys. That's it. It may not be. Yeah, it's hard to encapsulate it because it's a bridge between two worlds that's very different, and I understand that. The pull to Islam was stronger than ever, and I think for me, as a monk, my experiences were drawn mostly from prayer, from a sort of poetic intuitiveness. Reading rational arguments for Islam was helpful. Theology is, of course, indispensable. The historical case for Islam was also something that occupied my attention. All this was very helpful in building an intellectual case for Islam, but only as a sort of foundation, a launching point. At the end of the day, God is met in prayer. Forehead touching to the ground, it was the love that drew me. There was no mediator, there was no sacrament, save the word. And then I think he quotes the Shahada again. The voice of the divine calling out through the Quran, the call to prayer. And then he says the opening prayer again. My understanding of Islam, however, was still insufficient and incomplete. I felt a draw towards the mystical dimension of Islam, towards real Sufism. Yet every time I reached out to self-proclaimed Sufi groups in America, I did not find authentic Islam. Instead, I found aging white suburban hippies in yoga pants. Such is the fate of all mysticism in the United States. Such is the fate of all religious traditions, to be subsumed by white urban freaking hippie moms and hippie dads, aging boomers. Just, it's so infuriating, man. Like, it's maddening. I have dealt with this exact problem. It's so awful. It's such a tragedy. I can't help but laugh about it, but it is truly sad. Good thing he knows that he didn't fall into innovation, of course, because this is a sincere person. You know, that's the difference. It's a difference between just like, you know, like he talked about, the disillusioned white suburban yoga pants wearers. You know, God forgive me for even uttering such a terrible phrase, but you know, the sincere people know sincere religion, and sincere seekers know the difference between authenticity and inauthenticity. We know it. It's like it's this deep intuition inside of us. One might call it the fitra. You know, it's a deep primordial knowledge of what is true and what is false. So take a deep breath. Sorry, I get on these rants and I just kind of fall into them. I apologize. Whatever Sufism they observed or practiced may not have at one time had its roots in authentic Islam, but it clearly did not anymore. So my clandestine search for a Sufi master or a spiritual elder continued. My problem at the time was that I had this idea of a twofold structure of Islam: Sufism on one side, authentic or not, and a sort of modern Salafism on the other. I found each side of such a dichotomy lacking. True Sufism could not be true Sufism without authentic Orthodox Islam, and Orthodox Islam could not be authentic Orthodox Islam without true Sufism. So as a student of theology living in through the COVID area, I was sort of a stalemate. To whom should I talk to? Where should I go? I did have some Muslim friends, as kind as they were not terribly observant. They were friends and wished to help, but could not answer many of my questions. The university wasn't very helpful. They had their own religious program and their own agenda. All talk of authentic and orthodox religious belief and practices were to be subservient to the prevailing zeitgeist. All religions are ultimately the same. I'm okay if you're okay. Social justice matters are our true concern in this life. Yeah, that's a prevailing thing in the West. And that's a lot of Catholic holy orders that went from prayerful and mindful orders have basically just become secular self-help stuff. Or basically they just believe if they do the work, then they've completed the goal. Is to move America to Europe, they're disconnected from the mainland, no joke. What did impress me was the piety of some of the Muslim students on campus. Every day I would pray in a small chapel in the university student union, the hours, matins, vespers, etc. While I was almost always the only person in the chapel praying out of all the mostly Catholic students at this university, I did notice that the Muslim prayer room was regularly attended, something that I've heard attested to by Paul Williams and a lot of people. Like even when you have those prayer rooms at like the airports and stuff, they're mostly the Muslims that go in there and pray. There were many times when I felt the urge to take off my shoes and to go and pray with them. I graduated with my master's in theology. I was urged to continue to get my PhD, but I had other plans in mind. For years, some colleagues of mine and myself had been working on a project to start a small traditional monastery connected to a sustainable local community in rural America. That was supposed to be here in California. That's what that was supposed to be. Despite our good intentions and our labors, however, wrenches kept getting thrown in our plans. That might be as well what he's talking about with the hierarchy. The hierarchy might have thumbs down the whole ordeal, and that might have been another thing that pushed him away. Read Heading East after this series. Yeah, we've got a few things, yeah, but that's definitely one of them. I was going to go through his book list as well as that. Meanwhile, I continued my ongoing conversations with my Russian Orthodox friend turned Muslim. Through social media as well, I met a number of other wonderfully well-learned Muslims with whom I forged a deep connection. So much of what I thought about Islam to this point I realized was false. So many false impressions, so many wrong assumptions, so many unexamined prejudices. The walls began to crumble. At this point, I had a Quran always by my side, on my desk, along with my Bible. Wow, that's funny. Because that's what I've got. Right there. That's funny. That's funny. Both of which I read daily. I could say, and did say, that I considered myself to be sort of a Muslim Christian. But what a coinkydink. But I wasn't yet sure how. Coincidence? They don't exist. Yeah, right. The further delays in our monastic community plans gave me time to read, pray, and explore Islam further. This led to the end of 2021, my final stretch in Embrace of Islam, which I will cover in my next installment. The past year, the year of 2022, was one of intense spiritual transformation and epiphany. It was a year which had led me across the nation and back again in search of the one thing I had always dedicated my life in searching, the truth. And alhamdulillah, I found it. To be continued. And that's that's the part 3, that's it. So he doesn't have part 4. It'd be cool to have another stream, we can go through it. Because I'm assuming it's going to get meatier as time goes on. Probably going to get into more specifics. But yeah. So that's the end of his religious journey as far as it's posted. Now, we can go on. We have Heading East and we have his resources along the way. Which would you guys prefer? Should we go through the Heading East or should we just do the resources along the way first? Probably the Heading East first and then do resources along the way. John Irish, there's also an academic discussion proving Islam, brother. Okay. You're close, bro. Don't be late. Read in the name of your Lord. Heading East? Okay. East? Okay. Oops. I was already on it. And he's got this, like, what is this? It looks like calligraphy of some kind. I don't know. what that means in Arabic, but it looks like Arabic transcript. Can you zoom? Oop. That's as far as I can get, I think. I think it's his name, maybe? I think Allah. Yeah, that's what I thought too. Okay. Is it M? Obviously, it's sideways, right? Okay, cool, cool. Okay. Driving across the deserts of Nevada. Oh, yeah, boys. We have a lot of places like that that look like that in California, too. Hey, sweetheart. We got bored with the toys. But we're about to wrap up. It's been about a month and a half since I started my trek on the road east from California, yet it already feels like something of a lifetime. After decades of feeling drawn to Islam in varying degrees, I had finally decided to take the plunge. For this to happen, however, a physical move was necessary, and in order, I was living in a Catholic monastery. One simply can't be a priest and a monk publicly, but a Muslim privately. For the better part of a year, this had been the situation. At least, so he was a practicing monk / priest in the Christian system, in the Catholic system, for a year. Here's a bottle of water. Yes. So he, yeah, for a year. But he was secretly, basically, fully convinced of the truth of Islam. That's kind of crazy. At least increasingly so in my private thoughts. Now I had to step out into the unknown, no safety nets, just trusting God. In order to begin my new life as a Muslim, I felt it important to head back east, to go home, to the place where my journey into Islam began some 20 years ago at a little Islamic center in a university town in the Rust Belt of Appalachia. So that, for those who don't know, Appalachia are the eastern mountains on the east coast of the United States. So like West Virginia areas. I recalled the words of T.S. Eliot in his 4 quartets. With the drawing of this love and the voice of this calling, we shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive from where we started and know the place for the first time. And so I was coming home. I packed my truck in California with all of my earthly belongings, which is a little more than 24 or so boxes of books and some various photos, icons, and papers. At dawn, I made my way, icons meaning religious art from the Christian tradition. Orthodoxy has a very big emphasis, as well as Eastern Catholicism has a big emphasis on icons. At dawn, I made my way past the monastery chapel there. The monks were praying matins. They're chanting, lifting out into the cool California mountain air and greeting the sun rising to the east. So began my journey back home and into the Ummah. It took 5 days and all across the wide expanse of America, up over the Sierra, through the stark beauty of Nevada, into the majestic mountains of Salt Lake City, throughout the lonesome cowboy country of Wyoming, and straight into the heartlands of the Midwest, a copy of the Quran, the very word of God, on my dashboard leading the way. This was really the first time I had driven across the country. I took I-80, which historically traces the old Lincoln Highway as well as parts of the old Oregon and California trails. Watching our... Western Virginia, yeah. Yeah, there you go. There's people singing West Virginia in there. Watching hour after hour and day after day of sometimes rugged, sometimes barren landscapes pass me by over wide expanses of wild land and under an endless blue sky, my thoughts were on all of the original settlers and pioneers who braved elements and danger and disease to venture off into the unknown, risking their own lives and making their way out west to search for something. What is it? You have controller? West to search for something. Fortune, freedom, the almighty, the promised land of California. That's how my family got here. They were around Oklahoma, Arkansas area, and they moved west during the Great Dust Bowl, the farmer fallout. There's a huge dust storm and a barrenness, a drought that led a lot of people west. That's how my family are Germans. Dust Bowl Germans that came over to California. A better way of life for themselves and for their children. Manifest destiny through the Wild West is at the heart of the American imagination. The soul of America, boldly going forth and following, they often felt the hand of God. providence working in time and space, the founding idea of a nation. And here I am, headed back east, back to origins, back to beginnings, back to my home, my primordial identity. And then I think this is the Shahada again. This was a leap into the unknown for me, a voyage into the wilderness. As the Lord said to Abraham in the Tanakh, leave your country, your relatives, and your father's family, and go to the land I will show you. As a younger, middle-aged priest, my life until this point was set. I had a promising career as a priest. I was well-liked, well-educated. Everything, by all accounts, was going right. Yet my inner convictions have changed, matured, perhaps, but a seed planted years ago had blossomed into full bloom. And then he repeats the Shahada. I really had no choice. Whomever Allah guides, no one can lead astray, and whomsoever Allah gives guidance, for him there is no one to misguide. And it truly is like coming home, my primordial faith, for the Quran states that we worship God alone and submitted to him before we were ever born. It reads, and remember when your Lord brought forth from the loins of the children of Adam, their descendants, and had them testify regarding themselves. Allah asked, am I not your Lord? They replied, yes, you are. We testify. He cautioned, now, you have no right to say on Judgment Day, we were not aware of this. It is for this reason that converts to Islam often do not speak so much conversion as they speak of a reversion to Islam, our primordial faith, a long process of returning. So begins my first baby steps into the Ummah, arriving back east with no home, little money, just my old Ford, a bunch of books, and the clothes on my back, hardly knowing a lick of Arabic. And yet, the warmth and hospitality that I have witnessed and received from the Muslim community is simply phenomenal. Never have I experienced such hospitality. The future for me is uncertain. A leap into the dark is always wrought with some anxieties, and yet I feel such a peace, a joy, a relief. My pull towards Islam over 20 years has finally led me home. Now begins the work of entering deeper into the faith, a deeper learning, a love for the deen, a love for the Ummah, a love for the Prophet. This is the first step. What are you doing? This is the first step in a never-ending journey back to God. Subhanallah. What is it? I thought she had something in her mouth that she wasn't supposed to. Crazy. Yeah, beautifully written. And succinct, it's not some 4-minute read, It's impressive. This is such a common thread that so many of the reverts have been really profound writers, poets, things like that, very literary folks. Seems to be a big commonality between Westerners who revert. I catch you. All right. So then we'll go over his resources along the way, which are some of the books that he liked. Oh, look at that. Yep, Friedhof Schuon right there. That's one of the perennialists or traditionalists. Since news of my embrace of Islam has now officially gone public, and we're here reacting to it on YouTube, my message inbox has been jammed full and my phone has been ringing off the hook. It is currently impossible to speak to everyone and to answer every question that's been fielded to me. My time is simply limited, not to mention it's been a bit exhausting over the past 48 hours, but glory to God for all things. That said, I thought it might be helpful to put together a list of resources which I felt were very helpful for me personally along the way, many of which have brought me to the current embrace of Islam. This list is by no means exhaustive, even though I have been reading... Are you singing? Are you singing the Wheels on a Bus right now? This list is by no means exhaustive. Even though I've been reading about Islam for over 20 years, I realize I have not even scratched the surface. And this is true in what resources about in English. And this is true in what resources about in English. I don't really understand that, but the vast majority of writing about my Islamic philosophy, theology, jurisprudence, spirituality, etc. are still only available in Arabic. Wheels on the Bus, are you singing it? You're doing a good job. Wheels on the bus go round and round, round and round. The Clear Quran, okay. Ha! Got it. Number 1 down. Got it. Yes, a victory. What's all these middle school atheist takes in chat? I'm not sure. I haven't really been looking at chat. I was reading through that. The German writer Goethe was fascinated with Islam. I've read that. All right. There are a number of translations of the Quran available and many very good ones. So yeah, he remarks that this one is one of the best. What? The bus go round and round? So excited? Okay, I won't tickle you. Jeez. Islam and the Destiny of Man by Guy Eden. I just got this on PDF. So I'm going to be reading through this. Also Dostoevsky and many others, yeah. Tolstoy, I believe, too. So, let me zoom out a little bit. Back to 100%. All right, let me see if I can entertain her again real quick. I'll let you guys hash it out, whatever's going on in chat. I'll be right back. Oh, Edgar Allan Poe named one of his poems Al-Araf after the name of the 7th Surah of the Quran. It's nuts. That's really cool. Put the sauce in the comments. Dope. All right, I'll be right back, guys. All right. This will be the last stretch, so no more interruptions. No, I'm kidding. With babies, there are no such thing as no interruptions. So, but we're about to finish this up because we'll go through the reading list and then we'll end the stream and we'll move on to other things. Islam and the Destiny of Man by Guy Eden. Out of all the books I read, there is none that more perfectly matches my own thoughts as Guy Eden's Islam and the Destiny of Man. Guy Eden was an English diplomat and scholar, and he brings with him into his work deep wisdom and insight into what it means to be Muslim in the modern world. There are some very good descriptions and reviews of this book. It's available, look on Goodreads, it's available as a free PDF. That's where I got it from, actually, his link. The Heart of Islam by Syed Hossein Nasr. That he's the one who, he was the editor-in-chief on this Quran. If you can see his name there. Right there. So I know I've got a few other PDFs of his, like Muhammad as the Mirror in Islam and a bunch of other ones. He has some Shi'i leanings, but he's a syncretist, so he doesn't really, he's not like a hardline Shia. He just was raised in a Shia family, and so it's like a syncretist. And then you have Muhammad, his life. I have this book. I've read it. I've listened to it and read it. In the wake of the tragedy of 9/11, respected Islamic scholar Syed Hossein Nasr sought to write a book that would serve as a sort of introduction to Islam for many in America and in the West who might not have any real understanding of the faith. This book is the result, and it was one of the first that I read to seek a deeper understanding in Islam. Muhammad and his life based on the earliest sources. Like I said, I have this. There's a 12-week course by Sheikh Hamza Yusuf, which can be found on YouTube. I'll have to check that out. For personal reasons, I might also include Karen Armstrong's Muhammad, A Prophet for Our Time. This is the first book I read in college on the Prophet in January of 2002 and in the immediate wake of 9/11. The Essential Rumi by Coleman Barks. This book is not without some controversy. I've included it because it personally brought me closer to Islam through its poets and mystics. There's a related title which I also bought called The Essential Sufism by Robert Frager. Frager. The reason why Barks' translation of Rumi is controversial is because through Barks' poetic translations are beautiful, they often stray significantly from the original text and scrub the Muslimness out of Rumi. Another influential book on Sufism for its time was called The Sufis by Idris Shah, which was published in 1964. While it was an excellent source for aphorisms and sources of Sufi saints, most especially Mullah Nusraddin, the books is a mix of some of Shah's own thoughts and philosophy, which are questionable at times. Still, this was an influential book for me along the way. The Life and Works of Scholar and Catholic Priest Louis Massignon. So I was looking up this guy because I looked up this whole book list. Couldn't find too much on him, so maybe I'll check out those books. Jesus, Son of Mary, the Quran according to the teachings of Ibn Arabi. An excellent study and resource which was gifted to me upon taking my Shahada from the book description. Gloton is a major authority in Ibn Arabi studies in French. This book is a summary of his research on the topic of Jesus, Mary, and Islam through the Akbarian perspective. Akbarian, I don't know really what that is. Using Quranic vocabulary and syntax to explain the multi-layered meanings in the Quran, the esoteric perspective of Ibn Arabi is woven into the text, providing insights into the nature of Jesus and Mary and proving the universality of all three of the three Abrahamic revelations. The book is a balance that is presented between the esoteric approach and an historical and linguistic analysis of the subject. Rumi is overrated as far as Persian poets. There are better. Yeah, no, I believe it. These, like he says, this is a very introductory like stuff for him. This was his very foundational book list, and he even said, you know, obviously it's not without controversy, and it was and this translation was iffy. So, and then Ibn Arabi, the Unity of Being, the YouTube channel Let's Talk Religion, who I've watched some of his videos about this. An indispensable source of information about Islam over the years. Though the channel is not exclusively devoted to information and videos on Islam, a large chunk of it is dedicated to Islamic history, theology, and philosophy, and so on. The video entitled Ibn Arabi and the Unity of Being played a major role in introducing me to the thought of Ibn Arabi, who was an Arab, Andalusian Muslim scholar, mystic, poet, and philosopher who was extremely influential within Islamic thought. After he died, among practitioners of Sufism, he is renowned by the honorific title of Sheikh al-Akbar, which the Akbarian school derives its name. So that's what the Akbarian school is. And make him known as Dr. Maximus, the greatest teacher in medieval Europe. Paul Williams, look at that cat. Let's Talk Religion is pretty good. He's very knowledgeable, even if he's not Muslim himself. Yeah. I've read his stuff. Paul Williams, obviously. Seen a lot of his videos. I don't think that needs to be explained any further. Yo, look at that. Timothy Winter. Hakim Murad. He's a very profound and very brilliant man. Riding the Tiger of Modernity. That I really want to read. Or I watched this, actually. This is a lecture. I watched this. And I think I watched both of these lectures, actually, before any of this. All the indispensable stuff. Sheikh Hamza Yusuf, obviously, he's not without his controversy. He's here in California, so it'd be crazy to meet him one day. But he's pretty up there, so I don't think I would. Him and who's the other guy that works at Zaytuna College? Who he has, Paul Williams has had on lectures about the crucifixion of Jesus and stuff like that. Dr. Ali Ataie, he's there too. Imam Chris Caras. He's got a website here. Excellent blog about the Islamic faith. Omar Suleiman. No, it was Dr. Ali Ataie. That's who it was. Yeah. Like many other traditions, Islam is not simply to be learned in books and still less online. There's a great deal of bad information online, and it is easy to go down the wrong path inadvertently. My own Imam Chris Caras, is also a convert to Islam. Apart from being a one-on-one wealth of knowledge and personal counsel, he has an excellent blog about Islamic faith, which I highly recommend. These guys I haven't heard of. Like pretty much everything previous to this, I'm aware of. I either have the book or I know about the person. All these people, this stuff I get into the weeds. I don't know any of these people. I don't know if you guys do. Imam Abdul Aziz Suraqah. Yes, Paul Williams is Muslim. Yes, he reverted. This guy right here. Make sure you like the stream. Thanks, Craig. Another convert and imam in the Pittsburgh area, Imam Abdul Aziz Suraqah, is a respected scholar and translator. He has personally helped to guide me into Islam. Interviews and articles by him about him can be found online, and some of his works can be found on his Twitter page. He is a top G. One like for the stream, one for Craig. Mahdi Lock, the son of a Russian Orthodox scholar and professor. Whoa. Mahdi Lock is a teacher, student, blogger, writer, and professional freelance translator of classical Arabic Islamic texts into English. He's been studying theology, law, and other Islamic sciences for several years with teachers in England, North Africa, and the Middle East. He's a convert to Islam and has written both on his blog and elsewhere guides to the newly converted. In 2018, he published The Big Step: How to Survive Islam in the Anglosphere. For the past year or so, I have been in contact with Mahdi on a regular basis, and a close brotherly friendship has formed through our shared values and outlook in the faith and society. His videos can be found on YouTube and forward. Dr. Shabir Ali, very prominent Muslim debater, obviously, and that's his daughter. He's got his YouTube videos. I've seen a few of these videos, I think. Your Canadian Muslim TV shows since 2001. So silly. It's just funny because it's like it's so modern, but yet so like traditional in their garb. It makes me laugh. Hamza, Yusuf, and Shabir are not someone to listen because I see him trying to water down the religion. Oh, gotcha. And Dr. Ali Ataie, obviously. Powerhouse, hailing from Zaytuna College in California. Scholar of biblical hermeneutics with field specialities in sacred languages. He is insane. Like his knowledge of Hebrew, Greek, I think even some Aramaic and Arabic, it's crazy. It's crazy just listening to him when he'll talk about scriptural lines and stuff, and he'll just like quote the Hebrew, quote the Greek, quote like it's like boom, 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 and then he'll quote the Arabic when he's reading the Quran. It's nuts, absolutely nuts. Texas Muslims, I think it just means Texas Muslim, who is a very specific person, or maybe it's just Texas Muslims. It's a bunch of people. I don't know. I think that's Muslim Cowboy. I'm assuming that's who that is. Yeah, it's long, BH. That video about the crucifixion is like 4 hours long. Dune! Dune converted me. Watch that video, it's funny. Which one? Yeah, here we go again with Dune. Yeah, dude, why does this keep coming back? Dude, yeah. I don't know what just happened. The whole jihad reference from Dune? Yeah, so this one's a bit more difficult to explain. The film Dune, which came out in 2021, was a masterpiece on multiple levels. I saw it in theaters 3 times and put it on par with the film greats like Andrei Tarkovsky, whom I admire. The raw and futuristic Muslimness of Dune was a topic of discussion for some time between myself and a best friend of mine, who also embraced Islam at the same time that I did. Was it the aesthetics? Was it philosophy? I'm not quite sure, but somehow Dune helped tip the balance for me in favor of Islam. Part of the origins of Frank Herbert's work came from his studies of T.E. Lawrence and the warrior Muslim tribes, as well as a Muslim belief system, Arab languages, and eschatology. All of this would end up deeply enriching his novel, which came to life so magnificently in 2001 under the direction of Denis Villeneuve. It is a modern masterpiece. An excellent article on the Muslimness of Dune can be found here. The Hilarion jihad? That's right. That's right. The jihad commences at noon. Freaking YouTube moderators in this chat like, shut it down, it's getting too crazy. Too many freaking based takes in here. Alright, honorable mention, James S. Cutzinger. Okay, he's an Eastern Orthodox Christian. Paths to the Heart, Sufism in the Christian East. Malcolm X, actually, is one of his influences. Not surprising. I will simply out. This one might come as a surprise for some people, and it might seem like a left field choice for a former monk. However, I spent plenty of time jogging and lifting while listening to the speeches and interviews given by Malcolm X. The magnitude and the dignity and sincerity of this man has always captivated me. His story is an amazing character arc of redemption, dedication, self-discovery, and sacrifice. Simply outmod the YouTube mods. Greasy work fingers? Gotcha. Yeah. This is funny. Starting off as a common criminal, Malcolm eventually, through the stages of transition, discovers the truth and beauty of Islam, and that it is a faith that truly cuts through all races, nations, nationalities, and divisions until we are all brothers and sisters made in the image of God. This is how honest and forthright reappraisal of things, admitting his own wrongs and mistakes, would eventually lead to the end of his young and promising life. While this book is not primarily about Islam per se, it is a profound witness about the power of God working in the life of a man. The age-old dictum, to know thyself, coupled with a deep love of God, are the first steps towards freedom and standing firmly for the truth. There is much more that could be added to this list, but among all the sources that have been personally helpful to me in my embrace of Islam, I must put these at the top of my list. Please pray and make dua for me, brothers and sisters. Subhanallah for all things. So that's pretty much it. That is pretty much it. Oh, and then this is Ryan Hunter. This guy. This dude right here. See, like I told you, he's strange because he's a Sufi and a Shia at the same time. I remember writing him and he told me that. Malcolm X was supremely based, no doubt. We Malcolm X stands in this stream. We are not Martin Luther King Jr. stands. Down with Martin Luther King Jr., up with Malcolm X. Let's be real. Let's everybody be real here. That's the truth. Yo, Wolf, we'll need your book list once you convert. It's too vast. YouTube cannot hold all of that vast knowledge. Even if I posted the links, it would destroy YouTube. It would destroy YouTube. Blow it out completely. But yeah, so he's a strange guy, but obviously that's him. He's a redheaded ginger boy. But yeah, he has a few posts. They're all fairly old. He doesn't have any new ones. But yeah. Yeah, Malik Al-Shabazz. Yeah. So, well, all right, guys. I think that pretty much concludes it for today as far as this topic's concerned. I'm really glad that everybody was here and we could get through this. Let me know, like, put a comment down below following this video, like what we should put next, you know, or I can link. I don't think that this. I'll have to link his reading sources in the video because Medium, you have to pay to view these things. I'm on a free trial. Do I believe in eternal hell? Yes. Yes, I do believe in eternal hell. I'm not closed off to the possibility that there's not an eternal hell, but I don't think that there's any reason to believe that any of the earliest Christian scholars, except for some very odd ones that believed in the apostases, didn't believe in eternal hell. So I know from Facebook. Wow, Ryan. Yeah, there you go. Boom. Ryan Hunter. Well, I do believe in eternal hell, so I told you. So, was not the best of human beings till his late days. Oh, talking about MLK Jr., get your vote. A cool story of redemption, okay, Medi? Okay? Just kidding. But it's fine. We're all up to our own opinions. But, yeah, so that's about it. Anybody who came in late, of course, just rewatch the video. We went through his entire posts about it. We'll probably do a stream when he puts more stuff. So please react. Malcolm X, Martin Luther. I appreciate everybody for being here. Like I said, leave comments on this stream. Let me know what next to do. But like I said, baby's a little uppity. You saw her. She's no, I appreciate it. Thanks for everybody being here. Let me know where we want to go with this next, following this information. I'll try to post his book list because, like I said, Medium is behind a paywall, so you can't just get this info easily, and I'm on a free trial. So I appreciate it, guys. React to a Quran recitation. I'm not going to do that like on stream right now because, like I said, I got to go take care of the baby. But But maybe later I'll be able to do something like that. Whatever you do, don't turn into Bobby. I appreciate. Well, I mean, I don't know too much about him, but I just, I don't want to just do React content, you know? Like, I feel that's a little Star Wars later today with the looking face. That's a possibility. That's a possibility. So, all right, brothers, thank you so much for being here. That'll conclude today's stream. And feel free to rewatch it, guys. And then, like I said, leave comments and let me know where to go next. Take it easy, guys.